We are having Jerry Gidel back to comment about the WASD report this week in the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and his reaction about the increase in some energy prices right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. If you are new here, please make sure you subscribe. So, Jerry, how are you today? We are seeing a rebound of major commodities in the end of this week, and I guess it's still a reaction from the WASD report on Tuesday.
Yeah, there's definitely some connections here. To some extent, the markets, I think, pushed prices down pretty significantly there on Tuesday, and then somewhat on Wednesday. And then since then we've kind of bounced back. Definitely, the numbers this week from the USDA was slightly higher than expected here. Uh, on soybeans, it was up 9/10 of a bushel instead of half a bushel as the trade was looking for. And then on the corn side, they actually went up 2/10 when the trade was looking for a little bit down. I was looking down for a bushel or more on things on the U.S. yields and things like that. I think that caused a slight difference in the markets, but if you think about it, those are pretty minor differences from the USDA, and even their carryover stock numbers was 20 million higher than expected in beans, and corn it was closer to 80 or 90 million there. But we still have a lot of uncertainty, I think, in the U.S. here as to how the latter part of this harvest in the U.S. is going to go, and I think that was part of it. And also, we picked up a few overseas buyers here in the last couple of days.
And what are you seeing on that demand from overseas buyers?
Well, we had a little bit of interest there from China, and then today we had, geez, over. Well, actually, we put unknown destination and China together. Yesterday we had half a million metric tons. Now today we had two big unknown destinations, which is kind of unusual. So it doesn't mean that probably both of them are China, but at least one of them is. And then they bought 130,000 tons of beans. And so I kind of feel like that a lot of buyers are waiting to see what these numbers are going to be, and since they weren't dynamically huge increases in that, they were willing to step in here and actually start to start to do their fall purchases in that, because the world's importers of grains and that like to get their supplies closer to them going into the winter time in the northern hemisphere. And at this point, there isn't really a lot of alternatives. The southern hemisphere soybean crop has pretty well been shipped at this point. The corn crop that people were hoping to see some more exports out of Brazil has been very lackluster on what's come out of Brazil. So that does suggest that we might be, thus and Ukraine are the two places for corn in the short term here. But at this point, the demand situation seasonally is usually kind of picks up here between now and 1st of December. So well, I think that'll be an important thing to see how that comes along. And also, of course, what the yield reports are from the U.S. here in the last half of the harvest.
And the wheat is no exception for that demand. There is an upside, a significant upside for that commodity.
Yes, there has been. And every time you look around here, that the Russians export tax, it seems like it's higher. So interestingly enough, we had a sale actually get canceled right ahead of the USDA report from Egypt. I think all of a sudden they forgot that there was a report coming, so they thought, well, we'll wait to see what happens. They haven't come back, but there's been a couple of the buyers put in some tenders at that point, and the same situation on wheat from the standpoint of people looking to get their supplies closer to them during this winter period. It's as much to do with transportation issues, snags on things like that, and getting supplies to them. Nobody wants to go to their bin in the cold weather in the northern hemisphere and say, oh, there's nothing here to use to make flour or feed or whatever it is. So it's a human nature that decides that it needs to have things a little closer to the vest.
Yes, and today we saw the Brent crude oil overcoming the $85 bar.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you think that would impact corn and other products?
Well, I think this is kind of a story that's built since last spring on things. As time was went on, we had very lackluster energy prices all during 2020. From there, and that, as you pointed out, things have really picked up here, and actually at record price, or at least record for certain contract months. At this point, I look at the U.S. prices. You're looking at Brent, but they're both over $80 here, and that. And the twist of it is that I really don't think that seasonally this is something that you really should normally have here, because of the amount of driving demand that's really in the northern hemisphere again. Traditionally, after Labor Day, the price of crude oil kind of goes sideways and doesn't really, or maybe even goes down a little bit because of less driving miles. In at least U.S., probably the same situation in Europe and China along the way, or Japan. And so it's a situation where that's kind of counter seasonal, and that's been the caught everybody off guard. The strange thing about it is I kind of think that this whole thing was building out of the natural gas markets, and that particularly in Europe, we had lots of excitement last week about the prices of their natural gas situations, and that Russia's Putin said things would be better. He was going to help them out, but he hasn't. We haven't got as high as it was when he made that statement, but things are still very high at this point. And the interesting thing about it, natural gas is somewhat of a byproduct of drilling and exploration and things like that. And you find natural gas and gas supplies along with new supplies of crude oil. And since the U.S. and around the world, people have not been really out there expanding their productions in that. And also some of the commentary out of OPEC since the 1st of September has been, oh, well, they feel everything's fine. They don't think they need to do much expansion and things like that on the crude oil things along the way. I'd have to say that the twist of that is its impact on corn and soybeans. Psychologically, of course, it's important from the standpoint of energy is more expensive, then the other things should be more expensive. I think the twist of it has come to the point where recently there's been the realization that natural gas is hugely part of the nitrogen source for fertilizer, and around the world, particularly in the U.S., we do a tremendous amount of anhydrous ammonia from natural gas, and it's also an impact to some extent on phosphorus and potash. And the twist of this is it's all kind of repercussions of the fact that when we didn't kind of keep things going during 2020 and the first part of 2021. Now all of a sudden we're looking at needs for higher production of corn and soybeans. Not so much soybeans on nitrogen, but other fertilizers in that. And so it's kind of a delayed reaction of not speeding up our process of producing more fertilizer. And it's interesting that that China's decided that maybe we shouldn't export this fertilizer. We need it for ourselves, and Belarus and other places around the world, other types of fertilizers and things like that. And it's always interesting when prices all of a sudden start moving up. The supplies sometimes aren't as readily available as they might be, as people think that they're going to maybe get a little bit higher value for what they're producing. No, it's part of and it's the inflation mentality. It's part of what's gone on here, even in the U.S. About everything, relatively speaking, the general cost of things. But the interesting twist on this scenario is that the actual energy demand, from a point of view of driving in the world, is probably not driving the price up in crude oil and things like that. It's other things that are going on about lack of new supplies from various people and ideas about that. So I guess I'm a little cautionary here that maybe these energy prices, particularly in the crude oil and the direct demand for things, could be maybe hitting a plateau here for a bit. Doesn't mean that we've got all our problems settled at this point, but I think maybe psychologically here we've maybe pushed things past the logic of supplies not responding to these higher prices. We've actually started seeing this in other industries where things have started to pick up in production as the prices have increased.
And next week, we'll be watching the U.S. weather.
Oh yeah, U.S. weather is always interesting. We've had really an impact of the weather this last week again. This interesting weather pattern that's kind of impacted things east of the Mississippi, and that there's been some rains around out west, and we're supposed to kind of wind down here. Finally, we're going to be kind of on the cool side of the ledger, which is not surprising. This is fall. We're halfway through it, even in some ways, at least the first month, so we're in a situation where we might see by the middle of next week, or excuse me, by early next week, you might start to see some better harvesting progress in that. There is some showers still around at the end of next week. To some extent, I think the twist of the showers that we recently have potentially maybe stabilized some of the harvest moisture contents in both corn and soybeans. I don't know that rains provide a lot of increases in the actual soil or seed moisture, but they do at least eliminate some of the decline that happened last year. That was really a big factor at the end of the year, which all of a sudden caused the U.S. supply or U.S. yield numbers to slip down. I think we've maybe hit a little plateau on that in the short term here, but I think that the whole situation here, and also the other thing we got to keep in mind here, I've got to also keep ideas what's going on in Argentina. I know you guys had a little rain this week, but doesn't look all that positive for you going on to next week and the week after. It's really La Nina. It's really continues to build here at this point. I think Brazil has been pretty positive about thinking they're getting rain. They're going to have some rain potentially, I guess, in this coming week, or at least the first half of the week, and that will help their. Actually, some of the beans that were planted, I think, were in anticipation of more regular fall rains than they had last year. Some of the numbers were actually towards the high side of the recent range on planting in Brazil, while last year we were at the bottom side of the fall planting period. So it's interesting as we go. Weather around the world always has an influence, I think, and also just the demand ideas that are going on. Just as a sidelight, I think talking about that, somebody actually made this statement from one of the energy connected firms that the impact of the fertilizer changes here in the U.S. could make a switch of up to 3 million acres. I think, wow, that's a significant switch. from corn to beans. I think there is going to be people looking at, though, when you're talking about $700 to $800 for the anhydrous ammonia type situation, which, as I said before, maybe you're getting a little close there on the top. But at this point, those are some of the interesting twists. There is people look at, sometimes they don't. We've got to get the higher prices of beans to I think justify a 3 million increase. But if we do have some seasonal increases in beans because of Chinese buying, then we could definitely see some switchover. But it's right now, at least, we got a long ways to go between now and March and April. So we'll be talking about all those kind of things for a while.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Have a good weekend, sir, and we'll see if the U.S. is going to continue to do a little bit of a seasonal bottom here in these prices and look for post-harvest strength here in the next month.